So the first piece, we really focused on like starting your own initiative, and I really appreciate the tips that Eliza and Charmaine both gave us. My presentation is going to focus more on the other side, is maybe not starting your own initiative, but really like how can you really get connected in the community. And I'm going to speak to my experience and hopefully relate that to yours, and then share some strategies and resources that are available out there. So that's going to be the next piece. So from self-isolation to community connection, how volunteering bridged the gap for me. So for context, I'm a graduate of McMaster University. So some of you may be in high school, and that's totally okay. Some of you may be in university. So my context was that I was actually abroad when the COVID pandemic broke out, which was funny position to be in, but I was abroad and I had plans to be abroad. I was learning French and doing some other things abroad on a fellowship, and my plan was to be there till the end of August. So COVID has impacted everybody in different ways. I was really lucky to be healthy, to be young, to have sort of that privilege, and be able to make it back home in time. So I decided to leave the country that I was in to move back to Canada, because I thought it would be safer. But I found myself in this odd position, which you may be in, is that for the first time in a very long time, I didn't really know what to do with myself. I didn't have a job. I didn't really have any other commitments, and things were really like up in the air. So I really and I actually had to self-isolate for 14 days. So I had almost 14 days of self-isolating to think about what to do with myself for the next few months. So it was definitely like a struggle and a challenge. But I'm looking back at it, I'm excited to sort of share how I was able to get to a point now where I am really fortunate. And like some of you, I did do some job hunting initially, and that was really challenging because right now there isn't really a lot of jobs available during the pandemic. So I then had to pivot myself and be like, if I can't necessarily get a job, I'm lucky to be somewhat financially secure that I can take the time to volunteer, build my skills so that I can continue to have that in my resume. So really my motivations were around supporting my community because the needs seemed to have increased. I wanted to hone in on my skills, and I really wanted to get a sense of purpose back in my life because I really didn't like sort of just hanging out at home and not doing too much on a day-to-day basis. It just felt like my days were blending in together. And some of you may feel that way, and maybe can relate to that feeling of feeling stuck. And everybody's going to have different motivations. So we have to be cognizant of our own sort of motivations to get back into volunteering. Those were mine. So this is my story of how I got engaged. It will look different for everybody, but I hope that this can serve as some sort of strategies or inspiration. So one of the first things I did was that I really tried to be very active on Facebook and social media and on my broader network. So I joined a bunch of Facebook groups. I don't endorse any of these specific groups, but I'll just mention them for the sake of mentioning them. On Facebook, you can search opportunities and then look for Facebook groups, and I found something called Canada Youth Forum, Canada Young Leaders, another one called Opportunities Stream. So I found these random opportunities groups that have thousands of members, but things get posted fairly regularly. I also joined some groups that are around racial and health inequities and things like that. So I just joined these communities and kept an eye on them. So I would scroll through Facebook and sometimes opportunities would pop up. So through that, I actually was able to find a position with a pediatric clinic in Montreal that needed some research help. And, I knew that I had some research experience, so I could bring that in. And I reached out to them. And I really recommend that, if you are reaching out to someone, you find a thing through social media, make sure to really figure out what the opportunity is. You don't want to be taken advantage of. You don't want someone to just, use you as a way of getting a lot of work done. You want to make sure that you're valued and that someone's willing to mentor you and support you in doing work. So don't just commit to something because you see it on social media, but actually reach out to them being oh, could we have a 5 to 10 minute call? I really want to understand what you do better, understand, are they registered? If they're not registered, what have their initiative done to establish legitimacy for themselves so it's safe for you to engage. I wouldn't just jump on anyone's train without doing some level of validation. So that's what I did with the clinic. I had a call with them. I waited a week. I sent them sort of my resume and then slowly got started. I also like saw some smaller things that like on a day-to-day basis kept me engaged. So one thing was actually Charmaine's and Eliza's senior letter writing initiative. It was actually one of the first things I did because I was like, I had some extra time. So I wrote a letter, and it was really, really gratifying to do something really small as writing a letter. You don't have to get involved in something where you're doing 5 hours of volunteering every week. You can start with something really small like writing a letter, and that's kind of your gateway into doing more and can help you sort of gain that purpose back. And then I also contributed to something called Indoor Voice. It was like a pop-up initiative where you could like give some creative work, and they would send that out. It was like a magazine that they sent out to long-term care homes. So like I put in some poems that I had written during my quarantine period, and they actually sent out, my poems are included in a package that went out to long-term care homes. And that was also really, really fulfilling. So there's like a range of small things. And so social media and Facebook were definitely a key tool that I used. Another thing I did was I asked all my friends. So I just asked around, like friends, family, like anyone. Just you can literally make a post on social media if you feel comfortable enough, or just messaging people. And I was like, I'm really looking for something to do. I don't have a lot of time right now. And one thing I had done in the past is during my university career, I had done some tutoring. So I was like, I'm really interested in finding a tutoring program that's gone online. I emailed the people I've tutored with before, but they didn't have anything for me. So I found this, one of my friends suggested something called the Parsec Youth Network. And it's a youth-run sort of tutoring initiative. And what was really cool is I literally just put my name down on an Excel sheet. It was pretty straightforward. And then they like got back to me like a couple weeks later, and they were like, oh, we saw that you speak Urdu and you also have some experience in tutoring. We have a newcomer like a person who's a refugee who needs some help specifically in Urdu with their English and their schoolwork. So I got matched with her, and it was really up to me to kind of take that initiative. So it's really important that you're really like taking initiative in following up with when people reach out to you. Once you put your name down, like it's good that you follow up. So I did, and then I tutored this young girl for she's in high school, so I'm not that much older, but over Skype over the span of 2 months. And we actually were able to build a quite meaningful kind of tutoring relationship just over Skype, which I thought was new for me and definitely really fulfilling. So come fall, there's going to be obviously a lot more high school and elementary students. If you're in high school, maybe you can tutor elementary students. If you're in university, high school students who need support, especially as we work from home, it's really nice to have a tutor who can mentor you and support you and kind of push you to get your assignments done on time. So I was this kind of coach for her, and you can be that coach for someone else. I also got involved with something called Trad Magazine, and this is a new initiative. I'll briefly touch on it later, but this is essentially a new magazine funded through the Youth Opportunities Fund, and it's for around African and diaspora stories. So it's like writing articles, and I sort of wrote some pieces for them. And I heard about that also through like my friends, by just asking around. Similar to Eliza and Charmaine, you can also self-organize an initiative, but it doesn't have to be as big as, really starting a whole new program. It can be something small. Like think about a skill that you have or something creative that you like to do, whether that's photography, whether that's poetry, whether it's writing, music, you name it. You can turn that into something meaningful to give back to your community. In my case, I had just finished compiling a poetry book, and I used that as a way of raising some money for some global health organizations. And I basically said to people, if you give me money, I will send you my poetry book for free. And I will donate this money to XYZ charity. And so I just promoted that for a couple weeks, and I was able to raise a few $100s, and I was really, really happy about that. I've seen other friends make customized t-shirts, like Black Lives Matter customized t-shirts, sell them, and then donate sort of the profits to a Black Lives Matter organization. I've seen another friend who likes to make jewelry, and then use that as a way of also like donating profits. So there's lots of little ventures like that that you can do to make a difference. Or if you're really good at music, you can, I've seen initiatives where like people are having like concerts in their like front yard, or you could call up a long-term care home and see if they would be interested in a virtual concert. So really like think about what are the skills you have and how you could turn that into your own little mini initiative. was something that I recommend that worked for me. And then last but definitely not the least, there are sort of a plethora of volunteer centers across the country that have opportunities posted. So I went to my local volunteer website, which was at the time I was not working for Volunteer NBC. I just went on their website because I knew of them. And I found out about this telephone reassurance program run through a local nonprofit. And essentially what it is they match you with a senior and you call them weekly to engage with them in conversation. So for me, that's what I signed up. I had to give in a police check, go through a resume, go through an interview. The process actually took maybe a month or two, and then I finally was paired with a senior. So in positions that require relationship building, it might require you to be a little bit more patient in actually getting matched. So now I'm matched with a lovely woman. She's 86-year old, and I get to call her once a week and just literally just get to have a chat. And she tells me about her family, I tell her about mine, and it's a good time. And I enjoy it, and she enjoys it. And she lives independently, so it's a way of kind of building that connection. And I've never really gotten to engage with grandparents, so for me, it's a really, really fulfilling opportunity. So this is like my story of all the different ways that I was able to engage and reach a point where I was volunteering and felt good about my community engagement. So I'm going to go a little bit more in detail now, providing you with what's available out there. So I did a search on the Volunteer NBC database, and this is what I found. So you can, I will post a link and I will send that out. But these are the kinds of things that I've seen people recruiting for through the volunteer centers. So tutoring, wing one, telephone reassurance, which I talked about. There's a lot of opportunities for you to contribute to content creation and social media management. So if you're someone who's really like social media savvy, a lot of not-for-profits could use your support. Content editing, so if you're really good at like editing photography or video or graphic design, like any of those things, those are skills high in demand. And even if you're not perfect at them yet, like there's obviously opportunities to learn. Things like writing letters we've talked about. There might be some research roles as well available. There's also a lot of mentorship roles out there. So I know the Boys and Girls Clubs of Peel, as well as I'm sure in other parts of the country, are recruiting for mentorship roles where you can mentor newcomer youth or you can mentor like other younger youth, things like that. A lot of opportunities for that. And then there's even things like helpline volunteer responders. So you might be responding to some crisis calls or maybe just referring people out to different services. So those are the kinds of things I've seen in a remote setting. And then if you are someone who is able to volunteer in person, there are definitely opportunities like if you can drive, there's food delivery things. If you're willing to work at a food bank and pack up things, they definitely need help with that. If you're feeling like, I think a pretty safe in-person activity could be a community garden because it's an outdoor, so low risk, or a farmer's market. And there's even things like friendly visits where you or shopping volunteer where you shop for seniors and you maybe drop off their groceries or something like that. So that's what I've seen that's out there for your context. And in terms of how to find these opportunities, so these are the key resources that I recommend for your search. So the network of volunteer centers across the country. So you just go to volunteer.ca and you can find your local volunteer center. So if you're from Guelph, for example, there is a local volunteer center in Guelph who has opportunities posted. But the really cool thing right now about being virtual is that you don't necessarily have to stick to one volunteer center. There are opportunities that are remote, so you're not as limited by geography anymore. Specifically, our center is a Volunteer NBC, so you can go to volunteernbc.org. I recommend you create a profile. You don't have to create one to search for opportunities, but I recommend you do. And then you can actually click assisted search for recommendations. So that's like when you make your profile, you'll have to ask, like, do you want to search for just by yourself? Do you want assisted search? Assisted search means that someone at the center will actually go in, look at your interests, and actually recommend you opportunities from the database. So you'll get a little email and then you'll check your account and it'll tell you, oh, you should apply for this stuff. So that's pretty cool. And I know other volunteer centers like Volunteer Toronto has appointments that you can book and actually chat with someone, an advisor who will help you find a volunteer opportunity that's a good fit for you. Another important one is Spark Ontario is an initiative funded by the Ontario government. I also recognize that technically we only have 4 minutes till 7, but if you're able to stick around, I recommend you do. Go a little bit over time, but we'll really leave that last bit for questions. So you can stay for questions, and then we recommend for feedback as well. So Spark Ontario is sort of a provincial database for opportunities. You can go on there and search for things there. And then last but not least, if you're especially really keen on starting your own initiative, the Government of Canada actually has something through the Taking It Global platform. So you go risingyouth.ca and there you have to do a project proposal, and they're giving anywhere from $250 to $1,500 for launching your own service project in a community. So I thought that's pretty cool that they're supporting youth in doing that. So those are some key resources I recommend. I also want to feature some youth-led initiatives to check out. So I just noticed that Girls Empowerment Movement in the Peel region, so Peel Gems, if you're a woman, girl, identify as female or LGBTQ, they're recruiting for their mentorship program, and they're recruiting volunteers and also people to do a range of other director type roles. So I really recommend you check them out. Tradmag.ca, that's just another youth-led initiative that I'm part of, so I recommend that as well, which I thought they're doing some cool work. And if you want to be a writer, you can, I think, email trad@tradmag.ca, and there might be opportunities for that. And then I also recommend the Parsec Youth Network because it's something I engaged with to get connected with my tutoring initiative, and they're doing some pretty cool stuff. And they even have a summer camp, virtual summer camp. So these are just some featured initiatives. Again, youth-led initiatives come and go. They're a little bit harder to capture because they're not always registered with volunteer centers, so they might not show up in those databases, but you're more likely to see them on Facebook or through some other means, through social media, Instagram, that kind of thing. So noting that we have about 2 minutes, I'm going to quickly go through this part. Just some considerations for you during the pandemic is that right now the supply and demand of positions is a little bit difficult, where there's a lot more volunteers. So people like you who really, really want to contribute to your community, have some extra time, but there are less formal opportunities. So, you know, I think on our volunteer website, we have like maybe 200 opportunities listed right now. But, you know, there's not thousands and thousands. So the supply and demand is a little bit tricky, but I ask you to be sort of really, really patient with organizations because they're working really hard in adapting, and a lot of them maybe don't have as much funding as they did before. So really adapting to creating their programs virtually. So it might just take a little bit more time for you to get engaged with them. They might not like respond to you right away, but if they don't, like I highly, highly recommend following up. Like people really appreciate that. If they didn't get back to you, send an email a week later being like, hey, I applied to this thing. I haven't heard from you. Would really love to be involved. I think that's really appreciated. Obviously take into mind safety. So whether you're volunteering in person or online, you want to make sure that you are volunteering with credible organizations. So it's important to ask questions and not feel like, and you know, so you have a right to have those questions answered. And I recommend, if you don't already, to get a police check. So I know the Peel region has access to an online police check system, so you can apply for volunteer positions online. So I recommend doing that, especially if you're planning on applying for any of those more tricky opportunities. Not tricky, I mean like relationship opportunities. So that's my piece on the pandemic. That's actually all my pieces for this presentation. Sorry if I was a little bit quick. Oh, I guess I just wanted to mention to not forget to reflect. So I think I already mentioned this, but you know, make sure you're thinking about what are your key skills, what do you care about, and then using that to write a search criteria. So, you know, what's your age, what's your location, what are some keywords, and then really, really follow through by searching these different websites and actually following up with organizations. So you can connect with me at youth@volunteernbc.org. I'm going to skip this slide, but we'll share that email with you post this session as well.